Hi, Dr. Shade. Thank you so much for being on the podcast this morning, your afternoon, or your nighttime and my morning.
I'm happy to be here, Jodi. Very happy.
So we're going to talk all things detoxification and dive pretty deep into your amazing products as well that you've got from Quicksilver. So what I wanted to get started with is just a little bit of your backstory, how you got into this.
Everybody wants to hear that.
I know.
Meandering. How did this guy become what he is? And I was born in 1969, and I was born in, and it really does go back that far because I was born in a steel town. So there was all this airborne metallic pollution going on. I grew up during the 70s. The dentists loved to fill your mouth full of mercury fillings. When I got all 17 of them removed, my dentist here, the holistic guy, goes, "You're not going to like this. You only have one cavity." In the end, he said, maybe you had two. The rest were all sealant. Like you have a little crack and they'll drill it out and put it in. And so I had all this exposure, and I was also a very reductionist guy. And I grew up and then in college, I had a TBI. And then in college, I wasn't doing as well. And the TBI was on the rational side of the brain. And so I ended up going down this different path. Of course, I started taking hallucinogens, which really shook everything up quite a bit in college. And then I went down this very alternate path, and I was an organic farmer. And I was a stonemason for a while, I was an organic farmer, and then I was organic farming research. And in doing all that, and I was also, very much into mystical currents of teaching. And what I'd learned to do was to approach scientific stuff from a much more creative and much more systems thought. So my artistic side was handling scientific thought. And I emerged out of that and then went back to school and got a master's and then a PhD. And the PhD was on Mercury Biogeochemistry. That's how mercury, is released from, say, coal burning, goes into the air. How does it change to go into the rain? What form does it come down in? How does it change in the soil? How do the bacteria use it? How do they biomethylate it? How does it move up through the food chain? And then how does it interact with biology? So it was a very sophisticated understanding of all the changes that happen with mercury. And in doing that, I patented some testing called the Mercury Speciation testing. We sell it as the Mercury Tri Test, it being blood, hair, and urine. Different forms. You've got the fish form, methylmercury, inorganic form. So I patented that during grad school, went out to commercialize the patent, first doing environmental work, and then I introduced it into the integrative and functional medicine world, and first got traction with guys like Hal Huggins and Dietrich Klinghardt, these sort of elder statesmen of detox. And then, you have pointing out a problem, you got to come up with a solution. And I already, from all my past, I thought in systems biology. I thought about, I had done a lot of herbology, and so I thought about things that way. And then I wanted to solve this problem of toxicity. And I first started with this binder to bind. First I started by trying to detox myself with DMSA and got myself really sick. And so in watching a lot of talks, functional medicine talks, I suddenly had this light go on where I'm like, I shouldn't be forcing everything through the kidneys. I should move it through the GI tract. And I knew this was done in the early 70s during a poisoning in Iraq. And so I had made basically like silica gels, little sand grains with chelators on them for pulling metals out of water. And I'm like, I think I can take those orally. And I did. And that fixed all my toxicity issues that I had from getting all my amalgams out and using DMSA. And that led me to try to figure out why that was happening. And that was, I started learning about the glutathione system and how that works. Then I wanted to get glutathione in. And that led me to liposomes and nanoemulsions for getting things into the body that aren't usually absorbed through the GI tract. So that was the beginning of the detox system. We rounded it all out for mercury, cadmium, and arsenic, added EDTA for lead, and then took those delivery systems and started layering all these other metabolic formulas, taking lots of different aspects of functional medicine and taking them into these advanced delivery formulas at the same time, starting to understand more and more about liver pathways and deeper levels of detoxification and the interaction between detoxification and metabolic formulas. And that's where we are.
Wow, that was amazing. Good job. That was very well succinct.
I've been practicing.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine. So diving straight into this heavy metal. Now, I have a passion for detoxing effectively, and that's why I really love what you talk about, what you teach. And a lot of the idea behind detoxifying the body is to get everything out of the cells, get everything out of the tissues, and push it back out of the body. But what I understand is that if you do that, then if the gut, the impermeability is high, then it will just start to then recirculate, and then obviously into back into the liver again. So talk to me about the best way to detoxify, as well as the heavy metal component of that as well.
Yeah, and the problem that people get into and where all the Herxheimer reactions from detoxification is because they work at a cell level first, but they're not working at a filtration level. And so I like to say microcosm, macrocosm. Microcosm is the cell pushing out into circulation. Macrocosm is liver, GI, kidneys, filtering, and even skin filtering. And so the filter's got to be open and flowing before this stuff comes in. Now, you can do this all at the same time. Some people get into a very reductionist, I'm going to work on this, then I'm going to work on that, then I'm going to work on that. But if you're starting by opening up the filters, the cells will even respond by starting to dump more out. So that's where everything really has to start. And so when we got into what I call liver directionality and making sure that toxin detoxification is coupled to bioflow and then coupled to binders, that was really the big turn in the system where we were able to do what used to take us 9 months. Now we could do in 2 to 3 months because we didn't have to baby step it up so much. Once you open that up real strongly, everything starts to work. Now, to unpack kind of the most important part of that is that liver side. Now, everybody knows, I got to get my liver working. But how many people know what that even means?
Absolutely.
My liver working. I'll take some milk thistle and my liver will be working and it'll do all those magical things that a liver does. And so I like to talk about this directionality. And if you visualize like kind of a rectangle being a liver cell, on one side you have blood feeding it. Every liver cell fed on one side by blood. And transporters bringing things from the blood into the liver to be metabolized. And on the other side, it is drained by bile. So you see red on this side, green on this side. And it's called the Bile Canaliculus. And so the bile tree, I like pictures of the liver that have like 1 million threads of green running up into the liver. So it's like an upside down tree with the roots being the bile ducts and then going into little rootlets, and every cell drained by a rootlet of the Bile Canaliculus coming together into the common bile duct. You've got the gallbladder as a storage and release mechanism so that you can release bile for digestion, and then dumping down into the small intestine. Now, up in that cell, transporters moving things in from the blood and transporters moving toxins out with the bile, and the transporters themselves move both bile and toxins. So toxin flow is completely linked to bile flow. So if you have cholestasis, you have toxostasis. they have to move together. And so you have a transporter called MRP2 that moves bile salts and toxins. You have a transporter called BSEP, bile salt export pump, that moves bile salts. And those two are co-located. They're right next to each other, like twins in the canalicular membrane. And they're upregulated and downregulated together, just completely linked. And then there's another transporter called MDR that has a couple substrates it moves, but it moves PC as well, phosphatidylcholine, which is responsible for fluidizing the bile and making complexes with the bile so the bile doesn't digest everything that it's around. So all this stuff has to be flowing for the toxins to flow out. All right, now picture a scenario where, you know, you've been pulling toxins into that liver cell and all of a sudden you lock up the outflow. You can't go out anymore. And we'll talk in a second about what locks it up, and it'll be like, duh, of course it does. All right. And so when that all gets blocked up, I talked about these transporters over on the blood side. You have indoors and outdoors, and you're mostly using the indoors when everything's working and then going through the bile. But when it builds up in there, then the indoors get turned down and the outdoors get turned up, and you dump all that stuff that was in the cell back into the blood. And it's both toxins and bile salts. And what does that do to you then? The toxins, they go to your kidneys and you get lower back pain as they struggle to keep up with it. They go to the brain, they give you brain fog. They're going into the cells, they're creating immune reactions, you're making histamines, you're getting tired, the mitochondria is getting tired. And very importantly, they go to the skin. And the bile salts lodge under the skin, and that's where you get the itching. Pretty much once you like get your liver all grooved, anytime you're itching, you know you need some bitters, and then it'll go away right away. And if the toxins come out and form immunological reactions, then you get rashes. So itching, rashes, little upper quadrant pain, lower back pain, that's all the liver to gallbladder transition being stopped. And so that's called intrahepatic cholestasis, being inside the liver cholestasis, versus extrahepatic cholestasis. That's when you got a gallstone in the bile duct and the gallbladder preventing flow. So all that gallstone stuff started by having too much intrahepatic cholestasis and not enough flow of the green river. And then when that's not flowing, it starts coagulating and the stones start forming. And pretty much anybody who's had the gallbladder removed, that started by having slow bile flow up there. So our whole goal is to make sure that the flow is this way, not going back into the blood. We want to open up the bile transport, and at the same time that we're upregulating any aspects of detoxification. And then when that stuff all gets down to the GI, then you're going to grab those toxins with a binder so you don't get that reabsorption. That's the whole liver side of it.
That makes so much sense. So much sense. So talk to me then about how and where you focused on opening those pathways of the liver up and the bile flow. I know we've got PC because that helps that fluidity. However, I know your liposomal delivery for your bitters is a way of quickly opening up those bile channels. And then obviously you take the catch system afterwards. So you've got that push catch, which is an amazing system that you've designed. And then grabbing those toxins afterwards with that time, you know, very important.
Right. So let's unpack that, and we can go, we'll start with like the baby steps. This is like, you know, if you have a real intro detox, how do you just get the bile and the catching? And then we'll go to what's in liver sauce, which is, has more things added into it. So at the first level, like some of the clients who come to me and they have very obviously stuck livers, we might start with the bitters and the PC. So PC being phosphatidylcholine, we have a product, pure PC, and then the bitters number 9, or bitters X. Bitters X is usually what I use for cholestasis because it's got a lot of myrrh, and the myrrh is good for moving those blocked channels really well. In fact, it's used in Ayurveda because it moves blocked, in women's formulas, because it moves blocked blood out of the uterus, but it also moves stagnant bile out of the liver. All right. So we take the bitters and the PC, And about a half hour later, we take the ultra binder. Now, what's in the ultra binder? So this is a toxin binder cocktail. It's got charcoal, it's got zeolite and a little bentonite, so the clay minerals. It's got chitosan, which is derived from shellfish, but it's analergic. And it's a molecular mimic of Welchol, which is one of the things that are used in the shoemaker biotoxin protocols. And then it's got, for the GI health, it has acacia gum, which is a prebiotic, and it's a soothing compound, and a little bit of aloe as well. And it's got the last binder, and it is IMD, our metal-specific binder. So all those different cocktails have their specialty in the soup of toxins that's going to be coming out. Because, I'm going to do mercury detox. Like, only mercury is going to come out. And ain't the way it works. Everything's going to tumble out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so you need a cocktail to get that all. So at this first level, I like to call that fluidizing the liver. It's just going to get that flow going. It's not getting the cells wound up. It's not really getting the phases of detox wound up. There's something called NRF2 upregulation that turns up all the cells phases of detox, and especially at a cellular level, gets the cells to push out to the blood, and then the liver picks up. So at this level, we're just getting the bioflow and then the binder. Now, this timing is really unique to these liposomal and nanoemulsion systems that we make. So we make these things called lipid nanoparticles. And if there's water in the middle of this, they're like little bubbles of fat, but they're like nano-sized bubbles, less than 100 nanometers. And if there's water in the middle, it's called a liposome. And we use that for water-soluble things like B vitamins, vitamin C, glutathione. If it's got oil in the middle of the bubble, then it's called a nanoemulsion, and we use that for alcohol and oil-soluble compounds, and that would be simple oil solubles like CBD, vitamin D, vitamin A, and then what I call crystalline alcohol solubles like curcumin, quercetin, luteolin, resveratrol, silymarin. All right, so now, first level is just move that stuff. Now let's go to liver sauce and what's in that. Bitters X is in that. So that's the bitter mover. There's PC. There's not a ton, but there's enough to feed the PC needs. Then there's an immune stabilizing, I call them little programs in there. So what are these, combinations of things? So there's an immune stabilizing program in there that's quercetin, luteolin, and DIM. Now, quercetin and luteolin, most of the, the hip cats like yourself will know that's a mast cell stabilizer.
That's right.
And so prevent histamine release. Now, a lot of the toxic people are very high histamine and very reactive, and they can be reactive to the toxins you're moving, but they can be reactive to just like the bitters you're giving them. They get reactive all over the place. So the quercetin and luteolin are stabilizing the mast cells. The DIM is working on an immune cell level in the TH system. So you got TH1, TH2. TH2 and TH17 are these sort of hyperallergic, hyperinflammatory reactions people get. And then there's T regulatory dominance. T regulatory is immune pacifying, turns down all those allergic reactivities. And that's what DIM does, switches you away from TH2, TH17 to T regulatory balance. It also has an epigenetic effect. There's certain things that downregulate or epigenetically block NRF2 upregulation. NRF2 is this, it's called a nuclear transcription factor. It's something that goes in, it's released from the cytoplasm, goes into the nucleus, turns up all the genes for chemoprotective activity. That's detoxification, free radical control, all the things that we want, right? And those, turn up on a certain rhythm, and when the toxins build up and the free radicals build up, they turn up to clean out the cell. But mold toxins block those. Certain neoplastic changes and early cancer will block those. And DIM has an ability to unblock those. In fact, DIM was, we had Black Box 2 before Push Catch, and DIM had this great ability to open up the livers of these mold affected patients. Because, doesn't that suck that mold goes in and shuts down your liver?
That's the most difficult part, isn't it? It is,
but
yeah.
like, was this little wonder child for opening it back up. And so it's pacifying, it's opening up the liver, it's increasing, your ability to metabolize a lot of different hormones, and switching you to better estrogen metabolites, and it's an NRF2 upregulator. So that program's doing all that. Then you got silymarin in there. Silymarin is acting on different phases of detox. It's stabilizing the bile salt transporters, and it's a little bit of an NRF2 upregulator. And then there's R-lipoic acid. So R-lipoic acid is my favorite NRF2 upregulator, and that'll turn up the cell's ability to dump out into the blood. In fact, if you take a lot of lipoic acid, you'll see your blood mercury levels often rise before they go down as you squeeze from the cells, and some people squeeze from the cells faster than they filter. So in there, we had the bitters for the bile flow, PC for the bile flow. We had the immune stabilizers, and then we had the milk thistle as the liver upregulator, and R-lipoic as the cellular NRF2 upregulator to squeeze stuff out of the cells. Now, what's unique with these lipid nanoparticle deliveries is that they go in so fast. It's not just higher bioavailability over the same 8-hour time course that like quercetin and berberine absorb. Everything goes in and peaks in the blood between 15 and 30 minutes, activates all this stuff, gets your cells to dump toxins, gets your liver to upregulate, bringing things in, dumping stuff out. So all this stuff comes out, dumps out in the bile, and peaking in about 30 minutes, and then you throw down your ultra binder and you catch it all. And you tie together this nice, neat little bow around this whole cycle of detox. Release, clear, catch. And all that stuff is then done and out of your system. When you're trying to do that with capsules, it's like, when are you going to take your binder? Because this goes in a half hour, that takes 4 hours, that takes 8 hours, loose ends all over the place. But this, in, activate, clean, done. Do that once a day, twice a day, 3 times a day, half dose, single dose, double dose, triple dose. And that is the core of everything. And that's the push-catch system. Liver sauce pushes, binder catches. Then the rest become add-ons to tune what you're going to do. Are you going to go after metals? Which metals you're going to go after? Do you have underlying viral loads? How are you going to address that? Do you have a lot of neuroinflammation? You need CBD to calm things down while you do that. So those are how you use the other liposomes.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to dive into a little bit more detail into some of that. In a way that, can we separate some of these metals out? Is there a difference? I know you said that obviously we do go in with certain aspects to then bring out certain metals. So what I'm particularly interested in, just to ask you about today, is the lead, the mercury, even aluminium and tin, if you've had any experience with those, if you see higher levels in people. And so obviously we've got the mercury, we've got the IMD in the ultra binder. Is there anything more specific that we need to be looking at to get that out?
Yeah, well, let's group the metals into how they work. So you've got the big 4 metals. You've got mercury, cadmium, arsenic. I'm going to put those 3 here, and lead over here. So the big 4, mercury, cadmium, arsenic, lead. Mercury, cadmium, arsenic are all sulfhydryl reactive, meaning they work with the glutathione system and also metallothionein to go out of the body. So your add-on into our push-catch system for that is glutathione, right? We might add more IMD into our binder mix because there's just sort of a maintenance dose of IMD, because IMD is like taking the sulfhydryl binders and putting billions of them on a little sand grain, and you eat these sand grains and they go through and they're specific for those heavy metals, all right? Now, lead's a little different. Lead doesn't really, like all that sulfhydryl activity will stop a lot of the toxic manifestations of lead, but it won't export it out of the body. So we use EDTA for that. We use a liposome of EDTA. I mean, people do IV too, but the liposomes are a great day-to-day way to go. And it also brings and activates the movement of cadmium out. Actually, the best detox of cadmium is both glutathione and EDTA. So if you put those all together, then you get everything. Now, tin will come with that glutathione EDTA blend. Aluminum, or aluminium in the colonialized areas of the world, God save the aluminum queen, Aluminum, Queen, is a different animal. And, I can't say that we really even understand very well how we move aluminum out of the body. And, but it does come out. And one of the things that's used for moving aluminum out is silica. Okay. So high silica waters, or use of biosil, which is a organic silica extracted from horsetail, I believe. And then the high silica waters would be Volvic is probably the best, but Fiji is also high silica as well. Yeah. And so drinking a lot of that, the silicate and the aluminate, the silicate pushes out the aluminum. The aluminum is getting into where the silica should be. Silica is an organizer of your extracellular matrix. You use it for skin and stuff like that, but it's all cytoskeletal stuff. Like, what is the structuring, the patterning that the cells are laying down on? That patterning is derived from your extracellular matrix. And that's the one organ that extends head to toe and connects every different cell, every single cell. But it's a really hyper-ordered thing. And the silica is part of the ordering in there. And when aluminum gets in there, it starts disordering, and it starts like, it's kind of like something that should be more like a raw egg yolk becomes like a cooked egg yolk. It like gels up your extracellular matrix. So that's the most common way to push silica out. So, to push alumina out. And so I say, if you want to get alumina out, then you're going to add this in. And I haven't really wrapped my head around the aluminum issue, how much of an issue it is. Like, well, it's all raining down on us, and these nanoparticles and the injections. Well, those are very different than aluminum absorbed from your diet. Now, you barely absorb any aluminum from your diet, but you do get a tiny bit. But aluminum is the 8th largest abundant metal on the planet. It's not like little bits like the heavy metals. There's freaking tons of it. And it's all over the soil. It's all over your plants that you're eating. It's all over the place. And when is it really an issue? Is it when it comes in these concentrated little colloids, like when it's being used as an adjuvant in a vaccine, or in nanoparticles? They've seen that in the nanoparticles, aluminum or any metal nanoparticle will get into the lymph, and it'll clog up the lymph nodes and screw up the lymph nodes, and then you'll have immune dysfunction around the lymph nodes. And so it's like these little particles going around. It's not, so point is, measuring your blood aluminum may be irrelevant to these little point toxicities that are going on there. And are those even solved by putting in silica? So all I want to say is there's a lot of noise around aluminum, but there's not a lot of knowledge around aluminum.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. That's really good to sort of consider, at least anyway. Because I've seen in a lot of hair tissue mineral analyses that I do that there is quite a lot of high aluminium, or aluminum.
Yeah, and that's tough because there's aluminium all over the place. And so external contamination is a difficult thing. So I think whole blood aluminum is kind of the go-to there. Yeah. The guy who lectures on that the most is Chris Exley out of England. Do you know Chris at all?
I've heard of him. Yeah, I've not.
You've heard of him.
Yeah.
And the ironic thing is, back when we were both grad students, there was this really high-end, like, invitation-only meeting that you could go to called a Gordon Conference. And my advisor's advisor was running one, and so I got in, and Chris was there. And we met, and I had a poster on Mercury, and he had a poster on aluminium. And that was, before, we became who we are now. So I'm always, when I only see him, once every dog's age, and I'm like, remember the Gordon Conference? He's like, oh yeah. But he was the first one who showed the data on aluminum coming out when you drank the high silica water, and so that's where that came from. Okay. And I know the data is real because he's a PhD metals chemist and he doesn't make shit up, and that's a problem. Is a lot of people make stuff up.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to distinguish between real and made up. Yeah, absolutely. So I want to cover off a few things. Now, I wanted to cover off the Quinton minerals because I know they do affect the extracellular matrix as well and that organized structure. So I wanted to have, pick your brains on that a little bit. But before I move on to that, I just wanted to cover off Mercury and biofilms and what your opinion is on biofilms and even Mercury and biofilms together.
Hmm.
Well, we can start
All
with
right, I wasn't
biofilms,
really
maybe.
expecting that one as much.
Okay.
Well, because that's really broad, and
Yeah.
so if we're to unpack your question a little bit more, are you thinking, like Lyme systemic biofilms? Are you thinking GI biofilms? And why are you tying mercury into them?
So the prevalence of, I sort of have an idea of biofilms being a bit more prevalent in someone who is mercury or has higher levels of mercury. And that may just be an environmental thing for the body and how that is, how the body is functioning. And then obviously the immune system and everything is not functioning optimally. But even if we just pull apart the biofilms and even optimal, that kind of area, and we can leave that mercury aside. But biofilm seems to have a little bit more of a fascination around it because it is still a little bit unknown. It's a thing that we know about, but it's not really well known.
Yeah. Okay. So, and I mean, they're a big deal. Biofilms are a really big deal. But I want to pull apart mercury and biofilms, and we'll bring them back together later because I don't think there's that much of a causal relationship, except that mercury is a big screwer with your immune system. It's diminishing your immune system and it's switching. It's making it a little bit psychotic. It overreacts or underreacts. It's not doing the right thing. So in the like viruses are the most common thing that you see. In high mercury means low glutathione environments. You get a lot of the herpes family just freaking loves that. And, remember, there's 30 herpes viruses and, of course there's herpes 1 and herpes 2, but herpes zoster. Then the real big ones, Epstein-Barr cytomegalovirus, you're going to see a lot of proliferation of those internally, and people don't realize that's herpes 5 and herpes 7, herpes 6 in the brain. So I see a little bit more of that, but they're not biofilm makers so much. No. So in the biofilm makers, I was really impressed with Steve Fry's work, and I had a lot of biofilms at the time when I was doing this, and he'd take your blood and he had stains for biofilms. And like, if you're in the middle of one of these times where you just feel like crap, you're going to see all these biofilms in your blood. And these are these organisms making these little houses of slime that they're going to live in, and the houses of slime are protecting them from your immune system and giving them more favorable conditions. And we know now that Lyme makes biofilms. The coolest thing that Steve Fry did was pull cardiovascular plaque out with a team of cardiovascular guys at a hospital, and they found it was alive. There was all these aquatic organisms. So he got all into this because he was tired of hearing about post-Lyme and chronic Lyme, because he had a Lyme lab and he's like, I can't find a damn gene for, there is not a single Lyme bug alive in here. And then people have all their stories and they're hiding and they're running away from you. They know you're coming and they run in your brain, they come out, and it's just like, and it's just like, he's like, no, I'm fucking done with that. I am done with that. And I'm going to find out what's going on because these people are really sick. And so he started getting into biofilms. And then he got one of these gene sequencers and he was finding all the organisms. And he was finding all these aquatic parasites living in the vasculature, just living all over the place, including the ones that were in the plaque. Like the plaque was freaking alive and it was a biofilm. And so you have to, when you're treating that stuff, you need antimicrobials and you need, things like nattokinase and lumbrokinase and serrapeptase to break up those biofilms. And in fact, a lot of people, when they feel like crap after doing EDTA chelation, it's because EDTA is a big biofilm breaker too. And they're opening up and exposing these creatures, and the immune system's like, where'd they came from? And then they wind up all that inflammation and you feel like shit. And so that's that. And there was, years ago, like Angie Usman's a friend of mine, she did a lot of work around biofilms in the gut and metals coming out once you broke down biofilms in the gut. Now, biofilms in the gut are blocking all the transporters that are moving metals out into the GI, and I think they're creating chronic long-term inflammatory patterns, which make you hold on to metals in the cells. And when she would break those up, she would see a flush of metals come out in the stools. there was some, suggestion that the biofilms were cross-linked by metals and made firmer. I was more like, yeah, but the biofilms are also blocking all the transport of the metals out of the body. So if you break them up, maybe you're able to move them out. So that story was never totally resolved. And I'm thinking maybe that's where you were asking for the mercury biofilm connection. Was that it?
Yeah, I am. And I wasn't 100% sure on the link there, but that makes sense. And that's why I was just wondering why I see that in a sense of that in my clinic. And I just wanted to see your opinion on it.
The combination of the toxicity and the immune dysregulation. And once the bugs get in, they perpetuate that. So they're controlling your immune system. And one of the things when they're doing that, and there's always, when the biofilms are living in there, there's always this chronic low level inflammation. Well, inflammation blocks detoxification. In fact, this is a fundamental of detoxification, especially metals, is that they rely on your antioxidant system. And which is your detox system is part of this whole antioxidant detoxification chemopreventive system. And when your immune system is trying to kill things, it's relying on making pro-oxidants. It's making hydrogen peroxide. It's making bleach-like compounds and superoxide. And so it diminishes your antioxidant system, which is turning down your detox system. So it can go and torch the little bastards that are in there. And so there is that problem. And then you have to sort of flip that around. And so then, you like when you're into that stuck space where you're toxic and then biofilm infected, you got to do a little bit of both. You got to come in with antimicrobials. You need some biofilm breaking. You need some anti-inflammatories like CBD and curcumin to like flip you to the other side so you can get the toxins out. Now, there's always been these two schools. Which do we do first? Klinghardt used to say, you get the metals out and everything else fixes itself. But he just loved a needle full of DMPS. Like that was his favorite tool in the world. And in a way, you can kind of short circuit a system that's not detoxing, and flush some metals out with the DMPS. But really, so the question, do we go after the metals first or the bugs first? And I am solidly on the bug first side, even though I'm a detox guy. Once you get into that ground like that, but it's not a binary thing either. It's what am I going to be? I'm going to be antimicrobial forward or detox forward. And I'm antimicrobial with a detox underpinning. So because as you kill things, things are released. So you're always supporting that, but you're going in and you're bringing in bigger guns to kill stuff off. And then as you get more under control there, you can shift over and really ratchet up the detox and clear the rest out.
Yeah. That makes sense. And that's where I would say that being very, very applicable in clinic anyway. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So can we quickly touch on, well, not quickly, but on the Quinton. Robert Slovak. And I know
who's here in town. He's not here in the lab right now, but he's like 2-3 miles away. He was
amazing. Yeah, amazing.
Robert and his late brother Jack kept me alive in like 2008-9. I was about to run out of money, and they gave me a bridge loan. They own a chunk of my company, and they were selling Quinton. And now we took over the Quinton distribution. And Robert's doing more deuterium depleted water.
Yeah.
So Quinton, what is Quinton? All right. So raw, filter sterilized, unheated seawater from a special place off the coast of France. Now, the significance of the place and where they get it is that there is a permanent upwelling of water coming from the bottom of the ocean up. Now, this is water that goes on these long global cycles called the global conveyor. And this water that's coming up is thousands and thousands of years old. It's been coming up from the Antarctic up north, and then it wells up. It's filled with nutrients. And so there's a permanent, it actually comes up in a vortex. And there's a permanent phytoplankton bloom there, and above it a zooplankton bloom. So they go to where the bloom is, they go down right to the space between the phytoplankton and the zooplankton, the place where they say there's the maximum biocenosis, which is, this, made up term for biobalance. And they started doing this in the late 1800s, turn into the 1900s. Wow. And they were using it for everything. They were injecting it, they were inhaling it, they were drinking it, they were curing cholera, they were taking care of all these mineral deficiencies. I mean, it was just awesome stuff, but it had to be pulled right from this area. And there was all these compounds that have come out of the plankton that are complexing all these minerals that are coming up. So you've got every mineral from the crust complexed with all of these phytoplankton exudates, and then filter sterilized and put into these little ampules. Now, the really interesting part is there's 2 dilutions of this. And they used to dilute with the source from Evian water. And I don't know if that's still exactly the source. It may or may not be. But they take raw seawater at the, the saltiness that is, it's 3.3% sodium chloride. And that's called hypertonic. And then they dilute that down to isotonicity, same salt level as you, meaning your plasma, your tears, not your saliva as much, that's less salty, but that's all 0.9%. And that is the universal biological saltiness. And back in the primordial sea where all life emerged, that was an isotonic ocean. Now, over all this time, we've salted up the ocean from all the erosion of all the rocks, and now we're at the hypertonic. So they sell hypertonic and isotonic. Same stuff, just with some spring water in between, yet it has opposite effects on your autonomic nervous system. The isotonic is the more healing one, and it puts you into a more parasympathetic state. So in your autonomics, you have sympathetic, parasympathetic. Sympathetic is fight or flight. Parasympathetic, rest, digest, repair, regenerate, detoxify. So it shifts you over to parasympathetic. It actually works right through all these membranes in your mouth and starts going into the lymph, and then you swallow it, and it signals even your kidneys to start draining more. In fact, you'll be able to, you'll actually get more out of your kidney filtration when you're taking this, and it calms you down. It does all these beautiful things. It heals your stomach. Whereas the hypertonic is more of a tonic. It's stimulating. It's a little bit more sympathetic. You can see this all on a good heart rate variability machine, and it shifts you over there. And it's an alkalizer. It's a mineral supplement. Remember, all the minerals of the earth are in there. And so you can use these two different things in different ways. Like you want to reset your clock in the morning, you're going to take the hypertonic, wake yourself up, get going. At night, you're going to take the isotonic, settle yourself up, settle yourself down, and go to sleep. And so, yeah, that's where those come from, and they've been used for over 100 years, and they're just a fantastic yet utterly simple program.
And that's the simplicity that's hard to describe to clients, but it's so effective. I've had so many people come to me and say, wow, what is that stuff? Tell me more, because it's just making unbelievable changes in my body. I'm like, well, it's just that. It's just some seawater in a very vortexed and highly concentrated area of the ocean.
Yeah, and it's just got all the right things. And there's some, Robert likes to curate a lot of the literature around it, the old uses of it. One of the things he likes to curate, there's a book about trace minerals and transcription of genes. And a lot of these trace minerals that we didn't know were even necessary trace minerals end up being really important for different genes to be transcribed. And so it's just the whole program of life is in there, and that, it's a signal to your body, and it's a mineral set for your body that you may have been removed from for a long time. Robert likes to say, the isotonic ocean was the operating system of life, and it was carried up onto land, and it needs to be maintained. And if you look at the mineral disposition of the isotonic versus plasma, super, super similar.
Yeah, I love it a lot. And so now I wanted to stay on the nervous system. Now we can't get CBD, and we can't get your wonderful CBD, but I did try it when I was in London. In Australia, we can't get it here yet. But I know you talk a lot about, obviously, and I know about the parasympathetic nervous system and the ability for the body then to detox in that rather than the sympathetic. And I love the way that you do use CBD in that instance to increase that capacity, or to actually just enable that capacity of detoxification. So a little bit more information about that, maybe.
Great. And let's tie it back to the liver. And we're going to tie it to everything. All right.
Yeah.
Tie it to everything. All right. So autonomics, sympathetic, fight or flight, parasympathetic, rest, digest, repair, regenerate, detoxify. Your body's supposed to go in and out of these phases as needed. Now, fight and flight is also associated with the neurotransmitter glutamate, whereas the parasympathetic is associated with GABA, a very Zen neurotransmitter. Now, we start to demonize sympathetic and glutamate because they're doing bad things, but when you want to be on it and when you want to have memory, that's what you need. In fact, memory is all tied to fear and tied to survival. Like, what kills me? It's the most important thing to survival, is remembering what kills you, what is dangerous for you. And glutamate creates memory. But when that starts going too high, or too, you got too much glutamate stimulation, you get something called neuroinflammation, and you start making free radicals in the brain, and it locks the body into this sympathetic state. But even if it's not the glutamate doing it, and it's just you being on all the time and having a perception of being in danger all the time, what are you going to do? When you're in stress like that, you change biological prioritization. How are you going to use your energy? How are you going to use ATP? Now, you're not going to go into repairing and regenerating your body. You're going to get all your ATP and running the hell away from the danger. Whether that's your wife or the bills or a tiger, you're going to run away, right? And so you move priorities away from these things that we want to do. Now go back down to the liver. Boom. So what do you also not do when you're in fight or flight? Digest, because digest is a whole parasympathetic thing. You go and you get acupuncture and you're super parasympathetic. You get off the table. You're like, oh, I'm hungry. And, and you go eat. And bile flow. Remember, bile, it's not just a conduit for toxins, it's for digestion. So what do? You lock that up. You stop that. You don't do cellular detox and you don't do bile flow. That all stops. So when you're locked sympathetic all the time, you stop detoxifying. Now, let's also bring it back to hormones. And what is something that creates cholestasis in the hormone world? Estrogen. Right? So estrogen dominance, and what neurotransmitter does estrogen activate? Glutamate. So estrogen is on the glutamate side, which is good on some levels, but then it becomes anxiety and irritability, right? And on a liver level, it's locking up liver flow. So now what's the antidote to that? It's not testosterone, it's progesterone. And what does progesterone do? It stimulates GABA activity, and it's a bitter compound that opens up the liver. So you see these things reflexively. Stress reflexively blocks the liver. Blocked liver reflexively creates stress. Open liver reflexively creates a calmer life. And so all this stuff has to go on together. So how are we going to settle down the wound up brain? We can use CBD. We can use GABA. You can use progesterone. When I'm too much of an asshole, my wife tells me to take progesterone. And I do. And so, it's not just for girls anymore. And breathing exercises, magnesium, potassium, all these ways to titrate down that overactivated system are just so crucial. The CBD was like a miracle for doing detox with autistic kids, because autism has the wound up neuroinflammatory condition blocking all of it. That's why they end up so toxic. It's a little chicken or the egg. Did the toxins do it, or did the neurological condition collect all the toxins? So the combination of first we came to CBD, then we learned the push catch. When you do those two together, calm the system down, dump the liver, catch it all, you can take an autistic kid and go right into a full-on protocol, no problem at all. You get so many results from doing all that. But it's, getting all that brain, liver, binder all together.
That's incredible. Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely, when I tried your CBD product in London, it was very different to what I've tried from anything here. So it's the delivery system, yeah? Is that where you see that difference?
It all floods in, it's not like, it's usually like 2 hours to peak blood level. Our peak are between 15 and 30 minutes, and it's a 6-fold increase in how much gets in. So you get 6-fold more concentrated in this early window that whoosh, you feel it come in and settles everything down. At the same time that we're upregulating the cellular phases, the liver phases, so it's just calm down, dump everything, come in with a binder, and you're like, oh, life is better.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we don't have enough time for everything I want to ask. So I wanted to quickly cover, I know you have the NAD or the NMN out. Yeah. So I wanted to go over that. Yeah. And I've actually got some in my fridge as well. So, and I find it amazing. And I use it.
I dosed that up before we talked, and then I'm like, wow.
Yeah, you're ready to go. And around that as well, I wanted to ask you, there's so many different liposomal products on the market, and the difference that you see in the delivery system that you've created compared to maybe some of the other ones that are on the market, because it's hard to differentiate between the quality out there and the effectiveness.
Yeah, I mean, that's a real problem, because people are all, I'm grabbing something so I can dump some out and show you.
Yeah.
People, there's this general idea that all liposomes are the same, but it's just not true at all. And so the quality of a liposome is dictated by its size and it's what it's made out of, the elements of the membrane. Remember, the liposome is a lipid bilayer membrane, looks just like a cellular membrane, and it should be made out of very high quality very high purity phosphatidylcholine that'll be extracted from some lecithin. We used to use mostly soy lecithin, but we use mostly sunflower now because of all the paranoia around soy. Tell you the truth, it doesn't matter. By the time you purify everything out, there's nothing there from the soy anymore. You just have PC. But a lot of the brands that are trying to compete with us, they just go and get lecithin. So Baker's lecithin, or a little bit better is triple lecithin, is anywhere from 15 to 30% PC. Now you got all kinds of other junk in there. We use stuff that's 90 to 95% pure PC. It's injectable grade from German pharmaceutical companies, and it is primo. And it costs 10, 20 times more than that junk.
Absolutely.
And they're just blending that stuff up. And when you look at it, you'll see it's thick, gelatinous, or it's very milky. It'll be thin, but it looks like milk. Those are all the light hitting the little fat particles and bouncing off. Now, when you get down into the nano realm, where you're below 100 nanometers, you get something like that that's transparent. You can see right through it. It's got the color of the phospholipids, but it's transparent. Now, this is cool. Why is that? Because when the light hits it, it goes through it because the particles are now smaller than wavelengths of light. So like with a light microscope, even the best German optics, the smallest thing you can see is 200 nanometers because light can't hit and come back and give you resolution. So then you have to go to electron microscopy, electron beams. So these are under 100 nanometers, and that's where the light, you can't see anything anymore, so it's transparent. So this is a good way to look at your liposome and say, is it in the right size? So what is the relevance of size? The smaller the size, the faster the uptake. It actually goes between layers of cells. It goes through the mucous membranes, between layers of cells, and right into circulation. When we take the liposomes so small intraorally, you can, in 2 minutes, you can see the compounds in the blood. And then they rise to a peak, like I said, somewhere between 15 and 30 minutes, depending on which formulation and what person, but whoop, up like that. And you do not see that with the other products. Plus, the carrier, the liposome itself, is made out of high-quality phosphatidylcholine, which is a supplement itself. Remember, it makes bioflow. It makes membranes. It makes your cell membranes. It makes your mitochondrial membranes. It makes endoplasmic reticulum membranes. Everything, all of the electrochemistry of the cell is based on the membrane potential. It's how well the membrane separates a charge and that charge separation is used to drive enzymatic reactions. So you've got a supplement carrying a supplement in there. And that's when you get to those high levels. And this is how, these are the size ranges that pharma uses for liposomes. And the nutraceutical industry is just chuck it in a blender, and there's not very many, if any, high quality products that are out there.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
That's the differentiator. And we have all the data on all the uptake, and we know what it does. We know it works.
Yeah, absolutely. And you feel the difference when you take the two, and that's just that in there,
Anything that's calming you down, you feel right away. Anything that's bringing you up, like NAD Gold, you feel right away. B12, you feel right away. And that just speaks volumes for you.
Absolutely. So on the NAD, and it's an NMN, a lot of the David Sinclair information has come out. A lot of people are interested in the NMN, and I've done a lot of research in it and very interested in it myself and taking it myself as well. So, give me a bit more information about that maybe.
Yeah. So, NAD, it's like the golden child in functional medicine now, and it is the driver of all carbon metabolism, breaking things down into energy generating ATP. It is the driver of sirtuin and FOXO expression. These are our anti-aging longevity genes. It's the driver of nuclear mitochondrial coupling, making sure the mitochondria and the nucleus are all doing the same thing. It's a driver of all vitality, really. And so we want that. Now, what is NAD? Nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. It is the highest level of vitamin B3. So B3, you're going to supplement as niacin or nicotinamide are the low-level ones, but then there's all these levels to get up to NAD. And nicotinamide is faster to get there than niacin, but it's also a breakdown product of NAD, and so it ends up being an inhibitor of sirtuin. So it's not really a great way to go for that. So you want a higher order one, and the higher order ones that are NMN, which is one step away from NAD, and NR, nicotinamide riboside. So NMN is nicotinamide mononucleotide, and it just needs to be linked to the adenine, and then you have the dinucleotide. NR, nicotinamide riboside, it needs a phosphate group, and then it needs the adenine on, and then it becomes NAD. So two steps. Now, NR was sold for a while by Chromadex under the trade name Niagen, and they lectured that NMN doesn't have a transporter. You can't absorb it. You can't move it cell to cell. You have to use NR. It's the thing that's meant to be trafficked around. Turns out that wasn't true. Last year, they found the transporter for it, and you can use NMN.
There you go.
I made liposome out of NR, and it was freaking amazing, but they had all the patents around it, and I couldn't use it. So I'm like, look, NMN, I can use that. Works great, too. And sorry, guys. And they said to me after I did that, they go, yeah, don't think we didn't know that was going to work. We were just trying to ride that wave as long as we could. And Frank, it was funny because Frank Jacks, when we were in London at Health Optimization Summit, Frank was there lecturing on it. We were all at that cocktail party the first night. And I'm talking to him, and he's like, what are you working on? And I'm like, nothing, Frank. I had it in my pocket.
It wasn't out.
Up with it. And I'm like, this is going to be released in like 2 months, and you're going to get fucking mad. And so one of his business guys came over after we released it. He looked at it, he goes, yeah, good job. We knew it would happen eventually. So those are the two high order ones. And then, what we blend with it is this one called methyl charge. You need to be constantly regenerating SAMe when you're taking high doses of NMN, because NMN turns to NAD, NAD turns over a sirtuin, and it breaks off those high energy phosphate bonds, and you're left with nicotinamide. Now, nicotinamide can go back to NAD, but all inflammatory stressors block that. Whereas the movement, because nicotinamide gets turned into NMN and then gets turned into NAD. The movement from NMN to NAD is never blocked. That's always working. But the movement from NAM, nicotinamide, to NMN is the one that gets blocked a lot. It gets blocked with age, it gets blocked with all kinds of problems. Then the NAM, the nicotinamide, builds up and it blocks all this other stuff. So we come in with NAD to drive up into NAD. We come on with NMN to drive into NAD. And then what you got to do is pee out the excess NAM, which is pooling up. And you do that by methylating it with SAMe, S-adenosylmethionine. Okay. Then you're left with homocysteine. We don't want homocysteine. We got to regenerate that. How do you regenerate that? You regenerate that with methyl B12, methylfolate, and TMG. And so that is that's the folate cycle interacting with the methionine cycle. And so the methyl charge, what they, in the old days, 10 years ago, everything was about, we got to take a lot of 5-methylfolate because of our problems. Well, it turned out really what we had to do was supplement a lot of B2 to catalytically turn over the MTHFR enzyme more. And then we didn't have to drive in so many forms of folate. So what we do, there's a big dose of B2, there's a catalytic dose of B6, some folinic acid, which is the immediate precursor to methylfolate. We don't use methylfolate because it's unstable in these water environments, and a bunch of B12 and TMG. So that's all the things you need to turn over the folate cycle, the methionine cycle, and keep bleeding off the excess NAM that's formed by driving so much NAD formation and sirtuin activity.
Fascinating. You're just blowing my mind. Amazing. I love it. I love it. Oh, thank you so much, Chris. It's just so cool. Now, I wanted to ask you before we sort of wrap it up a little bit, do you have a kidney formula at all? A specific kidney formula? I know you have goldenrod in a few of your products.
Yeah, we haven't. I was playing around and I will get back to it. The transporters that are working in the kidney are the same ones that are in the liver. And so a lot of these formulas are servicing both liver and kidney. Now, when there's, direct problems in glomerular filtration, we're not really servicing that so much. And one of the things that you get in the kidney, you get like in glomerular nephritis, you get connective tissue inflammation around the tubules, and that's causing a lot of the problem. In fact, these metal detoxification reactions aren't really glomerular filtration. They're the same transport system that you have in the liver, and they're in the proximal tubules. That's where all the metal transport happens. It's active transport, it's not the filtration. So, getting the transporters working with all the stuff that's in liver sauce, plus some sort of diuretic to get you peeing more is what you need. So you can just add on, a little there's dandelion and there's goldenrod in there to support that. If you want more, get some cranberry or some more dandelion. Leaf is more diuretic than root. We use root, but root does both liver and kidney. So yeah, we are working on one, but we just don't have it there as much. And you know what I used before when I would, in the Tri Test, if I saw urine to blood ratios weren't very good, there's a formula from Ayush Herbs, A-Y-U-S-H. I don't know if you can get it there, but it was called Rentone, R-E-N-T-O-N-E. And maybe off the global web, you can get some down there, but that stuff was pretty priceless. That was really good for turning up how much metal got spilled out of the kidneys.
Okay, super interesting. All right, so Chris, what would you say is your number one thing, or even that you do every day, to help detoxification?
Well, first there's just, what do I do every day versus not every day? Every day is NAD and NAD and methyl charge. So I keep the NAD because that drives everything. Yeah. Then more intermittently, the nano milk thistle and glutathione whenever I'm drinking, which happens fairly often. I just hired a guy from Molson Coors, and you know, he's a PhD chemist, R&D guy, and because we'd worked together on putting cannabis in drinks, and then we hired him away, and his joke today, because the beer guys, you know, they drink all the time. I said, the milk thistle is really good when you drink. And he goes, so every day, right? So
everyday supplement.
Yeah, it's an everyday supplement. So those I'll use that way. Bitters is probably in the mix, you know, a couple, it's in the mix pretty often, a couple times a week. And then with like the push catch, I do that in chunks. Maybe I'll do it on the weekend. I'll do, you know, 3 or 4 cycles of it over the weekend, or, you know, after a couple of months, I'll be like, I got to do this for a week, and I'll do that for a week. But all of this is all supporting my detoxification. And so, you know, and I think I need some more binders here. And so once you get going with it, you know, I'm not a like fixed regimen guy unless I'm doing a formal detox, and then I'll do it a certain way for a certain amount of time. But then there's the day-to-day, what do I need right now? And so, yeah, glutathione, bitters, milk thistle, push catch, these are things that are all in rotation. Plus, you know, we didn't really get into it, but AMPK activation and keto and things that turn up lipolysis, autophagy, those are all integrated into our systems as well. And they have a dual role of supporting detoxification and what we call metabolic clarity, which is cleanly burning your carbon substrates, burning off fats, not accumulating them. So
your keto before 6 is a fantastic supplement.
It's just amazing, and it's so underregarded. All the keto people just shun it because they don't even believe that's possible. But
it is.
It's like I live on that stuff. I mean, I intermittent fast just about every day. You know, the week, you know, with my kids, I'll eat breakfast and, you know, just for fun. But most of the time, I intermittent fast, and I do keto before 6, and that's just amazing. And it is, you know, you can do push catch with keto before 6 and binder. In fact, when you put people on that and you have them going into ketosis, what do? They kick out all these fat soluble toxins. And they get toxic, and they call it keto flu. You get anybody with keto flu, give them a dose of binder, they feel better right away.
Exactly.
So that can be liver sauce and keto if you're more liver focused, but if you're more metabolic, you're trying to detox and clean up, you know, you've got insulin resistance and stuff, then you can use keto before 6 and binder.
Amazing. All right, I'm going to have to let you go, Dr. Shade. I'm taking enough of your time already, so thank you so much. It's an honor to have you on today, and appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Jodi. It's been a pleasure talking at high level.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
All right, bye-bye.